And one thing you'll see on the test is prime factorization. So here we're going to find the prime factorization of 180. We use a strategy called upside down division. So you can divide by any prime number, and our first 5 prime numbers are 2, 3, 5, 7, and 11. 180 is prime, so I know I can divide by 2. Half of 180 is 90. You want to keep going until you get to 1. So I could divide 90 by 3. There's other options. You could divide by 2 here. You could divide by 5. You don't have to divide in any certain order. So you might go in a different order than I would. I would divide that by 3, which gives me 10. I can divide 10 by 5, which gives me 2. And I can divide 2 by 2, which gives me 1. So these over here are our prime factors. And when you write prime factorization, you have to write it in order from least to greatest. So 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. And then we have to write it with exponents. So 2 times 2 is 2 to the second power. And 3 times 3 is 3 to the second power. And then the 5 is just 1 5, so it stays the same. So that right there is the prime factorization of 180. Another thing that will be on the test is order of operations. So remember that your strategy for order of operations is GEMDAS. It stands for grouping symbols, exponents, multiply and divide from left to right, add and subtract from left to right. So on this particular problem, we don't have any grouping symbols or any exponents. So next step is multiply or divide from left to right. Multiplication comes first. Everything else in the problem stays the same. Then I'm going to divide. That gives me 3. And again, everything else stays the same. Now we're going to add and subtract from left to right. So even though the A is before the S in GEMDAS, this arrow tells us go left to right. So the subtraction is going to come first. Last but not least, I'm going to add. That gives me 17. My answer for that one. Another thing that you have to know for your test is about these properties of operations. So we've got commutative, identity, associative, distributive, and inverse. Remember that commutative starts with CO for change order. So if you'll notice right here, all that changed is the order of the numbers and the variable. They switched around. So that's the commutative property. We have the identity property. If you think about your identity, that's who you are. And so in the identity property, the number keeps its identity. It stays the same. So that would be right here. So anytime you add 0 or you multiply by 1, the number is going to stay the same. Inverse property is when you add 2 opposites, you always get 0. Or if you multiply by a reciprocal, so if this is 4 over 1 and 1 over 4, those are reciprocals, you always get 1. So that's the inverse property. The associative property has to do with parentheses, and it just means the parentheses in the problem move. So here we have 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. The order of the numbers didn't change, just the parentheses did. So that's associative. And this last one, distributive. Remember, hippity, hoppity, distributive property. So 7 times W gives you 7W, and 7 times 4 gives you 28. So that right there is the distributive property. The next thing we're going to cover is expressions versus equations. So an equation, the word equation starts like equal sign. So anything that has an equal sign is an equation. The word is the same thing as equals. Is 16 equals 16, same thing. So all of those are equations. The rest of these are expressions. They do not have an equal sign or the word is. Here we have a model of the equation 4n plus 3, so there's 4n plus 3, equals 2n plus 7. Here's 2n plus 7. So they're equal to each other. Only one value of n is going to make that equation true. So we're going to try the different values. A says n is 1. So if this is 1, 1, 1, and 1, that's 4, and then 5, 6, 7. Over here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 7 and 9 are not the same, so that's not my answer. B says n is 2. So if n is 2, that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. And over here we have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, those came out the same. So I'm going to think that's probably my answer. But I always want to make sure that I double check. So I'm going to try C and D. If these are all 3, that's 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15. And over here, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 15 and 13 are not the same. Last but not least, if they are 4, that's 4, 8, 12, 16, 17, 18, 19. 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 19 and 15, not the same. So the only one that made both sides equal was answer choice B. Here we have another order of operations problem. So again, we're going to be using GEMDAS. This one does have grouping symbols, so I'm going to work that part first, and everything else in the problem is going to stay the same. I do have exponents in this problem. 2 to the 4th power means 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So this right here is going to be 16. Everything else in the problem is going to stay the same. Now I multiply, divide from left to right. So I don't do the multiplication because it's over here on the right. The division comes first, left to right. So everything else is going to stay the same. Then I can do my multiplication, which gives me 32. Now I add and subtract, again from left to right. So the subtraction comes first here. And then I can add, and I get 40. And the last thing that you're going to see on our test is equivalent expressions. So they gave us this expression in the problem. One of these is equivalent to that expression. So one way to figure out which one is equivalent is to use some number. I suggest the number 2, because it's easy, in place of all of the variables. So everywhere where I see an M, I'm going to make it a 2. Then I'm going to just work that out. 2 times 32 is 64. So one of these over here should also equal 64. 2 times 30 is 60, plus 2 is 62, so that's not my answer. 2 times 30 is 60. 60 times 2 is 120, that's way off. 2 times 30 is 60, and 2 times 4 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4, and 60 plus 4 is 64, so that looks good. And then the last one is 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 plus 2 is 8, which is, again, way off. So the only one that came out the same as the one in the problem was C. Okay, make sure you look back at your digital notebook or any of my previous videos if you still need help before tomorrow's test.